Welcome back from your break, everybody. I hope you had a nice break. So let's continue on with our application questions. Of course, application questions, meaning it uses a scenario or a case study or a picture to ask the question. So our first question, of course, then is a scenario. Read the following scenario and answer the questions that follow. Scooby and Shaggy Shoes, or SSS. Scooby and Shaggy are best friends who own a shoe factory. They are experiencing a few challenges. The increase in petrol prices are making delivering their products too expensive. I copy and paste demons. Their products too expensive. There is extreme poverty in the community where they operate their business. Their employees are not skilled and do not know how to operate the new machinery. Now the question asks, identify the business environment addressed in the scenario. Now when we refer back to the scenario, we see that, of course, the first sentence, Scooby and Shaggy are best friends, is kind of an introduction. They are experiencing a few challenges, and then they start to name the challenge. The first one, the increase in petrol prices. Okay, so when we see increase in petrol prices, this can be seen as an economical issue. The second sentence then continues to refer to the poverty in the community. Poverty, of course, being a socio-economic issue. And the last sentence then states their employees are not skilled and don't know how to operate the new machinery, which can be seen as technological issues. So then we can conclude that economic, social, and technological, of course, components, and the answer of components of the macro environment. So our answer then will be macro environment. Right, so then the question continues to be, quote 3 challenges faced by SSS. Classify, let me just first remove this red spot. Okay, so let's continue. Quote 3 challenges faced by SSS. Classify then each of them according to the components from the environment identified in question 1A. Now, of course, the environment we identified was the macro environment. So we then have to take these 3 challenges and classify them according to the components of the macro environment. So when we refer back to the scenario, the first 2 sentences, of course, being an introduction, and then the sentence states the increase in petrol prices are making delivering them their products too expensive. So that is then our first challenge. So we are going to quote that whole sentence because that is our challenge. Petrol prices then, of course, being an example of the economic environment. So we will then classify it as an economic environment issue. All right, then the scenario continues. There is extreme poverty in the community where they operate their business. Poverty, of course, being a socio-economic issue. So let's just first quote this challenge. Extreme poverty in the community where they operate their business. Now, poverty being a socio-economic issue, it can be safe to conclude that this then will be a social environment issue. Then it continues to the last sentence. Their employees are not skilled and does not know how to operate new machinery. The new machinery is, of course, then technology. And the fact that they are not skilled is an example of a technological environmental factor that can challenge the business. So, of course, then our quote will be that whole sentence. The employees are not skilled and does not know how to operate the new machinery. And, of course, we will then classify this as technological environment. So there we have it. We have quoted our challenges and we have classified them according to the components of the macro environment. So that is our first application question. Let's move on to our second. The second question then asks, identify the relevant macro environment components. So we must always just check which environment we are busy with, macro environment, described by each of the following statements. So of course, let's just think quickly. Our components being political, economic, social, legal, technological, and environmental. Now, statement A, due to the amended Employee Equity Act, so that's our clue, John now has to appoint more female employees. Now, act is a law. So an act is a law that has to be implemented. So this then will obviously be a legal environmental issue. So we can classify it as legal environment. All right, statement B. Sachin had to stop his production of petrol due to a shortage of coal in the world. So the coal here is an example of resources or natural resources that is used in production. And then, of course, natural and international environments are all included in one environment, and that environment is our environmental environment. So this component will then be environmental environment. So that is then our statement B. Statement C. Jabu is experiencing difficulties with her website and online store. So this is referring to she is having difficulty with technology. So then we can say that this is a technological challenge. So we can then identify this as technological environment. And then our last statement, some of Albert's employees have HIV/AIDS and are regularly absent from work. So this is of course then a health issue, and a health issue is an example of our environmental issues. Remember, it was health issues and pollution, so environmental then will be our component relevant to this statement. Our answer then being environmental environment. So there we have identified the components that suits each statement. Let's then move on to our last application question, and the question reads, classify each of the following challenges according to the relevant component of the macro environment. So again, just always make sure which environment we are working with. In this case, the components of the macro environment. All right, so the first challenge, A, unemployment, poverty, and low levels of literacy. These are all, of course, examples of socioeconomic issues. So then we can conclude that this will be our social environment. All right, so this then is the social environment as component of the macro environment. The second one, or B rather, pollution, health issues such as COVID-19. Remember, pollution, health issues as all examples of our environmental environment. So our answer here is environmental environments. Okay, so let's look at the last two. C then, business, labor, and consumer laws. Laws, of course, refers to legal environment. So our answer for this one, legal environment. And then our last one, political instability like strikes and corruption. And this is then, of course, examples of political environmental issues. So our answer then for this one is political environment. And there we have then classified each of these challenges according to the component of the macro environment. Now, before we wrap up, I think we should take a short break.